So Aaron's got his serious hat on, and he's fixing to tell me something, and I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna like it.
To quote Stevie Nicks, I think I have to go my own way.
A vacation from Gas Monkey is going to be a permanent one.
Millions of viewers thought Richard Rawlings and Aaron Kaufman were the perfect Gas Monkey duo. They weren't. On camera, Richard was the salesman and Aaron was the builder, a combination that turned Fast and Loud into a hit and Gas Monkey Garage into a household name. But once Aaron walked away, the friendly partnership audiences thought they understood began to look very different.
So we got that done, and then not much else. So because the burr, A to May got finally sitting, it's actually bolted to its framework.
Richard eventually gave his side of the story, and some of his comments revealed just how little the two men saw their relationship the same way. So what really drove Aaron out of Gas Monkey, and what did Richard Rawlings have to say about the partnership years later? Join us as we uncover what really happened between them. The salesman who needed a mechanic. Richard Rawlings is one of the biggest names in the automotive repair industry, but he didn't start out as a mechanic, nor did he ever claim to be one. Before Gas Monkey Garage became a household name, he was running a Dallas printing company. But for some reason, he sold it and put the money into a small shop that flipped classic cars. Richard had an eye for a bargain and a mouth built for television. What he didn't have was the hands to actually fix what he bought. For that reason, his first attempt at the business failed. Gas Monkey Garage stalled out early on, and Richard had to shut it down, taking a detour into home healthcare sales just to pay the bills. Aaron Kaufman, who'd been working with him on and off since he was 20, drifted to a different shop during that stretch. Before Aaron and Richard met, Aaron was tinkering with whatever vehicles he could find while attending high school. When he graduated, there was no mechanical engineering degree waiting for him. So he went straight into a machine shop and learned fabrication the hard way, with almost no supervision, figuring it out through trial and error. Small shops. He did driveway builds for friends with zero glamour. At the time, he was just a guy trying to get good enough at his craft to make a living from it. It was during this stretch that he crossed paths with Richard. They met at a local Fort Worth garage, years before Fast and Loud existed. At first, they only exchanged a few words, and then, for years, they simply didn't see each other again. In the meantime, Aaron continued working odd jobs around Fort Worth, including a stint at a suspension shop. Even though it didn't seem like it then, he was slowly building the kind of hands-on reputation that would later define him. A guy who could look at a car nobody else wanted to touch and see exactly what it needed. Then in 2004, out of nowhere, Richard called, asking Aaron to work on a Mustang Fastback for him. It seemed like a one-off favor, nothing more. Aaron did the job, sent the car back, and figured that was the end of it. But a couple of weeks later, Richard called again. This time the offer was bigger. He offered him the position of running his new shop, the Gas Monkey Garage. At the time, Richard had a vision. He wanted a TV show. According to him, this was meant to be a world-class hot rod shop. Aaron himself later admitted he thought the whole idea sounded like a fantasy. Whatever their personal chemistry may have been, Richard clearly needed what Aaron could do: build the cars. According to Aaron, Richard liked to start early and be done by mid-morning, a beer already open, while Aaron took the overnight leg, driving until 3 in the morning while his boss slept. For a while, the whole idea of a hot rod shop really looked like a pipe dream. Until it wasn't. The show that changed everything. Fast and Loud came to life almost by accident when a sizzle reel Richard had been shopping for years landed on the desk of a young Discovery executive named Craig Kaufman. Nobody at the network expected much from it. There were no car shows on the air at the time, and nobody had much faith in the format. But Craig was an optimistic man. According to him, The raw footage of Richard and Aaron together read differently than anything else in development. The executive has said the pitch meetings before the show got greenlit were an uphill fight. Nobody at Discovery believed a show about buying junk cars in Dallas would work. It wasn't a glamorous city, and there wasn't an obvious built-in audience for it. But Craig Kaufman held on to the little spark of hope he saw in the chemistry between the duo. Discovery eventually backed him up, and Fast and Loud premiered in 2012 and ran for 16 seasons, airing close to 160 episodes. The premise never really changed. Richard was always hustling up junkers, and Aaron brought them back from the dead with masterful craftsmanship, usually on a deadline that would make most restoration shops laugh. Still, audiences were captivated by the process. They wanted to see the run-down cars that were restored and modified under Aaron's guidance, then sold for a profit by Richard. Fans admired Aaron's technical skill and dedicated approach to work, which made him feel genuine in a world increasingly dominated by television appearances. That formula built more than a hit show. It built a lifestyle brand, with apparel, bars, energy drinks, and spin-offs like Misfit Garage, eventually carrying the Gas Monkey name into places a repair shop doesn't normally go. Richard Rawlings leaned all the way into the persona too. He published a memoir around the time the show took off. Tattoos, one-liners, and a beer cracked open by mid-morning. He was built for the camera in a way Aaron never seemed to be. By this time, Aaron's closest collaborator, Scott, had joined him, and together with a third mechanic, K.C. Mathieu, they turned a fledgling shop into something that could survive on network television. But the success came with a price, and Aaron was the one paying it. What working for Richard was actually like. As the garage grew, it took on a relentless pace that began to take its toll on Aaron. And contrary to what many would expect, that rhythm didn't slow down once the show started. In the first season alone, Aaron and the other mechanics were tasked with building 12 cars in 24 weeks, a pace nobody in the shop had attempted before, and nobody has matched since. Work weeks regularly ran past 100 hours once travel was factored in, and the commute between Fort Worth and the Dallas garage added another dozen hours a week before anyone had picked up a wrench. Aaron has admitted to falling asleep inside the cars he was restoring while the cameras were still rolling. He showered with a garden hose behind the building because there wasn't time to go home. In the very first episode, working against a brutal deadline on a decades-old Model A, he was visibly running on fumes during his own interview segments, barely able to keep his eyes open while explaining the build. Scott, who Aaron brought onto the show himself, made his loyalties clear from the start. He said flatly that he never worked for Richard, only for Aaron, and that almost nobody around the shop actually enjoyed working for Richard. That's one mechanic's blunt assessment of Richard. Although he said it years after he'd left the show entirely, it lines up with a pattern that keeps showing up in how the people closest to Richard describe him. Respected as a promoter, but not necessarily loved as a boss. According to Aaron, the crew shot roughly 100 minutes of footage for every 60 seconds that actually made it to air. That means most of the exhaustion, the overnight sessions, and the failed attempts before a build finally came together never existed for the audience at all. What viewers got was the highlight reel. What Aaron lived through was hours of work compressed into 45 minutes of finished television, with none of the credit for the parts that hurt. As the seasons went on, the creative limits tightened. One time, Aaron built a 1963 Ford Falcon for the Pikes Peak Hill climb, loaded with twin turbos and heavy custom fabrication. It took months, cost serious money, and pushed him creatively. Exactly the kind of work that made him feel alive as a builder. But after that, the network changed direction. Future projects had to be smaller, faster, and cheaper too. Aaron tried to fight for bigger ideas, even going as far as pitching an EcoBoost-powered De Tomaso Pantera, a complex build that would have required at least 12 weeks of heavy fabrication and custom engineering. The producers rejected it almost immediately. In their opinion, it was too expensive, too slow, and not made for television. After that, every ambitious plan he brought forward met the same fate. For someone known as one of the strongest builders in the entire state, it started to feel like wasted potential, and rightly so. Meanwhile, Richard, the boss, didn't seem bothered one bit. The tight deadlines that seemed impossible to meet were the very thing that drove the show forward after all. The faster things moved, the more energized he seemed. But Aaron was built differently and was heading in the opposite direction. He valued time and precision. Both men were stuck working side by side while pulling toward completely different goals, and the tension grew harder to ignore. And eventually, Aaron stopped trying to make the arrangement work. The line he never walked back. In March 2017, Fast and Loud aired an episode fans had been bracing for since rumors started circulating months earlier. Aaron told Richard, on camera, that his time away from the shop wasn't merely a break. It was permanent. He'd floated it as an extended vacation before that. By the time the real conversation aired, there was no walking it back. Aaron didn't dress up his reasoning much. He directly told Richard he had other projects he wanted to chase, ones the show's schedule couldn't accommodate, and borrowed a line from a Stevie Nicks song to explain that he had to go his own way. This is the part Richard eventually had to answer for directly, and what he said cut through a lot of the speculation fans had been running with. In a blog post on the Gas Monkey Garage website, Richard admitted the departure had genuinely caught him off guard. Some sources reported that after Aaron left, Richard told reporters that Gas Monkey was stronger than ever. He said that the shop felt calmer, and things were easier now. Those comments stung many fans who had come to love Aaron's presence on the show. Fast and Loud didn't fold after Aaron left either. The show ran 3 more years and 4 more seasons without him, which was its own kind of statement. Richard had insisted the shop could survive the loss, and the run length backed that claim up, even if a lot of longtime fans never fully warmed to the seasons that followed. Aaron's departure wasn't the part that shocked fans most. It was what Richard said about him afterward. Just my employee. The real reveal came a year later, when Richard sat down for a lengthy D Magazine profile built around Aaron's new show. The reporter asked him directly about the relationship fans thought they understood. His answer surprised a lot of longtime viewers. Richard said everybody thought they were buddies, but Aaron was just his employee for the 14 years they worked together. They never spent time together outside the shop. Not once, in more than a decade. Aaron, in the same piece, described something similar from his side. He said he and Richard simply saw the world differently, right down to how they valued relationships with other people, and that whatever friendly rapport fans saw on screen had mostly faded by the time he left. Craig Kaufman, the Discovery executive who'd championed the show from its earliest pitch, also had an opinion. After enough years as somebody else's partner, most people eventually want to go build something of their own, and he believed that was really what was driving Aaron. So the mystery fans had been chewing on for years wasn't really a mystery once both men spoke plainly about it in the same conversation. There was no betrayal, at least none in public, and no on-camera blow-up buried in editing. Richard's statement didn't explain why Aaron wanted out. So why did he leave? Aaron speaks out. Aaron later explained, in an interview with Art of Gears, that the show's production schedule was the real source of friction between them. A restoration that would normally take the better part of a year got compressed into 9 days, sometimes less, because the network needed a finished build for the next episode. Craftsmanship wasn't the priority. Finishing was. For a mechanic who cared about the details, that pace couldn't hold forever. Aaron wanted cars that stood on their craftsmanship alone, not cars that just looked finished enough for a reveal segment. He spoke about that same ambitious Pantera build he once pitched. In his opinion, that was the kind of complex, time-intensive project television's format simply couldn't accommodate. Richard, meanwhile, was running a business that depended on the show's momentum. Fewer completed builds meant fewer usable episodes, and fewer episodes meant a smaller footprint for a brand that was rapidly expanding well beyond the garage floor. Every hour Aaron spent double-checking a weld was an hour that had to be justified against a schedule that didn't bend for perfectionism. 16 seasons of that output is a rare achievement in reality television. But it came at a cost. Richard, as the business owner, was far better positioned to absorb than the mechanic doing the actual wrenching. Aaron put it plainly years later. He said the last 5 years of the partnership felt closer to 20. At that point, the burnout was already reaching a breaking point. The same turnarounds that made Fast and Loud must-watch television were wearing down the person doing the actual work every week. Richard never disputed that account once it went public. If anything, his own comments about the split suggest he understood exactly what was driving it. He just wasn't willing to slow the model down. When Aaron was asked about Richard Rawlings, he said it wasn't that they had an unfriendly rapport. They just don't have much rapport these days. Then he added the line that explains everything. They're just two guys who built something huge together, grew in different directions, and drifted the way people do when a shared project ends. The partnership was over. What came next would show what each man actually wanted. Two men, two different endings. Aaron Kaufman didn't disappear after leaving Gas Monkey Garage. He launched ArcLight Fabrication in Dallas, focused on aftermarket parts for classic Ford F-100 trucks. It wasn't smooth sailing, though. He later admitted that becoming the boss was harder than anything he faced on television. At Gas Monkey, he focused on fabrication while someone else worried about the business. Now, every decision landed on his desk. Hiring, inventory, marketing, digital content, and even small details like tool maintenance and supply orders. Nothing moved unless he handled it. In mid-2019, rumors started spreading that ArcLight had quietly shut down. Enough people were asking that Aaron had to address it directly on the company's Facebook page, essentially saying, "We're still here, we just moved locations." The original shop and showroom did close, but it was a relocation, not a collapse. Was that enough to actually sink the business? Not even close, but it shows how fragile things can look from the outside when a former TV star's day-to-day life stops being filmed. A shop moving locations is a Tuesday for most business owners. For Kaufman, it briefly became a rumor that he was washed up. He returned to television with Shifting Gears with Aaron Kaufman in 2018, a show built around his own projects instead of Richard's junkyard finds. He later starred in Aaron Needs a Job, which sent him into unfamiliar trades around the country, including coal mining and firefighting, before he eventually stepped back toward running ArcLight full-time. Shifting Gears itself was a deliberate departure from everything that defined Fast and Loud. Aaron built each arc around finding a new type of vehicle, doing the real work of building it, and then testing it in competition instead of flipping it for profit at auction. His first project was a heavily modified off-road truck built to compete in the King of the Hammers, widely considered the hardest one-day off-road race in the world. The exact kind of build that never would have survived a 9-day Gas Monkey timeline. The show didn't last. After 2 seasons, Discovery moved on, and the ratings never caught up to what Fast and Loud had pulled in at its peak. Aaron didn't seem to treat that as a loss. He'd already gotten what he wanted out of it, a project built at his own pace, tested on his own terms, with his name as the only one that mattered on the credits. Richard, for his part, kept building the Gas Monkey brand well past Fast and Loud's cancellation in 2020, a wind-down he confirmed publicly on the Joe Rogan Experience. He moved into garage rehab, kept the merchandise and beverage lines running, and expanded the brand's footprint into bars and event spaces around Dallas. Neither man has said much publicly about the other since that 2018 interview. There's no reported feud and no ongoing back and forth playing out online. Just 2 men who built something remarkable together, worked out they wanted different things from it, and went their separate ways once the math stopped adding up for either of them. In the end, there may never have been a dramatic betrayal between Richard Rawlings and Aaron Kaufman. Sometimes 2 people simply build something together, discover they want different things from it, and realize that staying together would cost more than walking away. Would Fast and Loud have lasted longer if Kaufman had never left? And can he ever team up with Rawlings again? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.